Welcome back to Small Business Diaries. My name's John Davis. I'm the content lead at Capsule. And today we've got Steve Ledgerwood, our CEO, back for another episode. And today we've got Kieran Innes. I hope that's how you pronounce your last name, by the way. I didn't care to ask.
Innes, we don't mind. We don't mind.
One or the other. A little bit about Kieran, though. He is CEO and founder of a company called Stribe. That do employee engagement software, primarily surveys, lots of other things, but we'll get into the detail of what Kieran does, why he does it, and what his company does a little bit later on the episode. I thought I'd just kick things off straight away, though. I was a bit nosy, actually, poked around with one of your direct reports, actually, at Stribe, and did a little bit of digging. And I hear you're really into science fiction and Lord of the Rings. So let's start with the Lord of the Rings theme. If you had to pick one member of the Fellowship that represented you, what would it be? Who would it be, should I say?
Oh, Merry or Pippin, just causing an absolute mayhem everywhere I go. Merry, for sure.
Yeah.
I want to say Gandalf because it's cool, but it's not. Everyone that knows me will just laugh at that.
Not a realistic representation.
Yeah,
of
not at
Merry
all.
and Pippin.
It's more of a caricature, Gandalf.
With that said, just tell us a little bit about you for us in your own words.
Yeah, of course. So thank you both so much for inviting me on for the conversation today. I'm looking forward to it. I'm Kieran, as John said. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a business called Stribe and another product called Toot Toot. So we do employee engagement software on the Stribe side, and we do an anti-bullying tool for schools on the Toot Toot side. My background's all tech, so I've been coding since about the age of 13, since we got our very first computer in the house, and I've just always been obsessed with how they work and trying to build things.
What was that first computer?
I was going to ask the same question.
Yeah. It was, I don't know the exact model number, but I do know it was a HP Tower, and I remember my mum got it out of the Littlewoods catalogue because you could buy it on monthly finance, and so she did that for our Christmas, or as we say up north, she got it on tick.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're probably, I would say, early 30s, right? Mid 30s, maybe?
Clutching on to early 30s, 32.
All right, good. Yeah. Mine was a ZX Spectrum, so I'm definitely showing my age here.
Yeah. I missed the whole
I
ZX
don't remember what mine was, so that's showing my age as well, really.
Yeah, you just did it all on slate.
Yeah.
I had those floppy disks that you had to put in eventually, so yeah, I don't know.
And tell us what was your earliest memory growing up?
Lots of them. I mean, I grew up in a really amazing town in the northeast of England called Berwick upon Tweed. It's right on the Scottish border, which is why I sound some part Geordie and some part Scottish in
I was
every
trying to
other
place
word.
your accent. It's all over
I know,
the place.
it's very strange. It's very strange. But I grew up in a council estate in Berwick, and we just had a lot of fun. It was a lovely place to grow up. I've got tons of them. The one that comes to my mind when you ask that, though, is we had a neighbour just down the street called Tom and Jessie, so a really, really old couple. And me and my brothers used to go there on a weekend because Jessie would make scones. And so we'd just go and we'd have to endure countdown, that's the punishment for having scones. But then we got freshly baked scones, and then we got really good at countdown.
There we go.
And what was your first most important formative experience, if you can remember that?
I don't know about if it's my first or not, but I do remember growing up, both my parents worked. I can't really remember a time where my mom and dad didn't work, and they used to flip as well. So during the day, my dad was a welder, so he'd go to a metal workshop. He would do that he was a foreman there eventually as well, so he was up really early. It was 5 a.m. to get there, and then he wouldn't be back till maybe 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night, we'd be back from school, Mom would put the dinner on the table, and then she'd go out and she'd do an entire shift it was like a shellfish factory down on the beach. So like deshelling prawns and whatnot, freezing cold factory. I remember having to go and visit her a few times, and it was like a freezer. And Berwick's already a cold place in the northeast, but they somehow made it colder.
When was your first job?
Depends what you call by job. I remember really, really young. We had a lawnmower. She'd be like, Kieran, you're not charging that old woman to do our grass. You'll do it for free. So you end up doing a lot of gardens for free until your mum's out of earshot, and then you got a quid, which was really nice. So that's probably my first thing I did for money. But my first job, it must have been either a paper boy or dishwashing in the garden centre cafe, and both of them would have been around the age of 12 or 13. I can't remember exactly.
I was a paper boy during my GCSEs, and I'm not gonna lie to you, like, people have this, like, I think very manicured caricatured version of what being a paper boy is, but the reality is like way harder than, like, actually it's like you get up at the crack of dawn and, like, you know, it's like 4 or 5 in the morning, and like the guy would, like, the newsagent would be like, right, here's like 200 newspapers, right? That's half your load. Deliver them, and then come and like the worst day was to do it on a Sunday, because it would come with all the bloody inserts. So
all the
back
colour
could be killing
supplements.
it.
Ridiculous. Everybody thinks it's like an 80s American movie. You're just cycling down a boulevard on a BMX. You got a paper that's like a fly and it's just rolled up, and you just throw it. You've got to go to everybody's house. You've got to make sure it's not wet. You don't get a cover for it. If it was wet, you got absolutely bollocked off the boss when you got back, because somebody would complain, because everybody wanted their paper. It was gross, and it, like you say,
you put your hands through a letterbox, and on the other side of the dog, like
exactly.
It's
ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I did love it though. I remember doing it with my brother as well. So when he came back in the summer, we used to do it together, and we'd have like semi-different shifts, going different streets and stuff. But it was nice. And then you kind of divide up the money, but it wasn't a lot of money back then. I was talking to somebody about my garden centre job the other day, and I remember being on something like £2 an hour. £2 something an hour.
Yeah.
You do like 12 hours. I might not have done 12 hours. Maybe that was against some labour law or something, but it felt like 12 hours. And then you get 20 quid at the end of the day. It's just brutal.
It was for the round that I did on a Saturday and Sunday, it was £13 a day for 400 newspapers that took like the best part of like 5 hours to deliver. It's just unbelievable.
But that feeling at Christmas when you went round and got tips and stuff was amazing. Like, that made the whole year worth it.
Yeah, definitely. They come out chasing you down the street.
Couldn't you just start in December and then get the bonus and then finish in January?
I think people would stick it out because of the bonus. It's the only thing that would get you through winter. Is like, I can't wait for the last week of Christmas because I'm going to get a little bit of money. I might get £1 off somebody. But like John says, if you've got 400 houses and you get £1 off somebody, that's a lot of houses to get. It's good money. It's good money. So I don't think anybody that was thinking of packing it in probably waited till their New Year's resolutions and then thought, you know what, paper delivery's not for me.
And the shopkeepers, they knew what they were doing, because, like, you know, I go back and it's like, you give me money and it's like, oh, what do you want? Do you want anything? That's the first thing you would ask. You know, like, want some chocolate, want some blackjacks, want some fruit salads, want some sweet, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Anything to not give you the money.
Rant aside, I wanted to ask you this question, really. So you founded these two businesses that we'll talk about in a little bit more detail, but what wasn't clear to me from looking at your background is what you did before then. So you talked about your first job, but what did you do before you founded these two businesses?
Yeah. I worked at another startup. It was just luck would have it, really. I was so I'd learned to code at kind of 13, and by learn to code I mean like the very start of it. I learned to code very badly at 13. But then by the age of maybe 16 or so, I was doing odd little websites for small local businesses and small local magazines and things. And that was making me good money for somebody that was 16 and living at home. Like, I was making a few £100 a website. I was helping kind of put online presences to these businesses that just didn't have one. And then I was thinking a lot over my A-levels about uni and whatnot and what I wanted to get into. And I just wasn't sure. Like I'd taken a wide range of A-levels because I didn't know if I wanted to do physics, didn't know if I wanted to do computing and IT. I didn't want to know if I wanted to go into maths. I didn't know if I wanted to go into economics. So I just had all of these interests. And that's been a kind of theme of mine all along, is just trying things little bits at a time, but trying lots of them. And I got to like the age of 18 and I realized that people go to uni to then get a qualification, to get a job, to make money. And I naively at the time was like, well, I'm already making money, so I can kind of just skip that part and just go and get a job. And so after a bit of searching, and it was a bit of search, it was maybe 4 or 5 months to be fair, I thought I'd made the wrong choice towards the end of it. I found there was a startup in the town that we grew up in that did local search advertising for small businesses. So they would own like thousands of domain names for like placenamerestaurants.com, placenamebedandbreakfast.com. And it was kind of like yellow pages for the internet. They built these microsites. They had a small team of a call center within the business, and they would basically phone these restaurants and say, hey, this is exclusive. We're the top of Google, because back then getting to the top of Google was actually pretty easy before they released all of their SEO updates that killed a lot of these businesses. So you can probably guess what's coming with this business. They would say there's only going to be 15 restaurants on this business, but everybody who types in Manchester restaurants sees our site. We're very top. Do you Google it now? There's a really easy sales pitch for the person on the phone. And then 15 businesses would come on, and then that was it. We just renew them every year, and you just times that by 2,000 different place names around the UK and different services, not just restaurants. So managed to blag an interview there with no experience other than kind of my own website that I'd put online that probably looks horrendous. I've got that code somewhere, but I've never looked at it in years. And I remember going in, and I didn't know what you had to do for interviews. I went in with a briefcase and a suit. Which was horrendous.
Love it.
And I sat down. It was for an operations assistant role, which I took to mean they want a developer. So I brought in code. I brought in examples of websites I built. What I hadn't done is read the job description that just said it's data entry. Like that's what it is. So I'm in the interview, basically talking to my future boss Gary Heron and my future manager Cam, and saying, do you want to see my code? You've not asked about my code yet, kind of halfway through. And they're like awkwardly going, yeah, get it out. Show us your code. Sure. So we showed them it. But I must have left an impression, because the next day I got a phone call off of Gary, and he said he'd like to offer me the role. He just said he just saw something in me and wanted me to come in and start the next week, which was awesome. So did that. Got very bored very quickly though. I think my first task at that job was automating my own job, because that data entry was mind-numbing.
Yeah.
I have a quick side note there. We recently have hired someone. That person remained nameless because that's not fair on them. But they came to their first interview in a full-on suit. Online.
Nice. Like it.
So they obviously in different countries. And so, we were incredibly bowled over with the fact that he wanted to have the suit. And we asked the question at the end of the interview, is like, suit, is this something that you just wanted to do because you wanted to create an impression, or is this like just your thing? And it's his thing. Like that's what he does. He just wears suits for his fashion, right? And we just, as a business these days in the tech industry, you just don't see that anymore. Just not at all.
Not at all.
So it was very surprising.
I can't remember the last time I wore a suit. I can't even remember.
Yeah.
No,
I had to borrow a suit the other day because I was going to some black tie thing, and I was like, I'm not buying a black tie for this event anyway. So I borrowed it from one of my friends locally here. And he's a size or two bigger than me, so I didn't look great. But hey, I wore a suit, so it's fine.
So basically what you're saying is you went to this event looking like a 15-year-old school prom date.
Probably, exactly. Yeah.
And the problem with buying your own suit after the age of 30 is we're no longer made of like rubber and dreams. So we change shape so often. You buy one just a waist.
Thanks for bringing the tone down, Kieran.
Yeah.
Spot on. Anyway, sorry, side note, finished.
No, it's good.
So you started data entry. You left quickly when you automated it. What did you do after that?
No, so didn't leave quickly. It was that became the theme of my role. There was basically DevOps before DevOps was even a thing. Like nobody even had that term in their head at the time. But it was just like we had a tech business, and it blew me away that we did so much stuff manually. Like we had our renewal list for who our customer success team were going to phone was managed on a spreadsheet. Like we had no central database of who our people were. We had no way for that CS team to just press renew or press cancel and put in some reasons and get some data. We were just kind of like blind to all of this intelligence, despite being so data rich. It was just spread out all over the place. So that very quickly became my job, was just gluing these parts together and making things more efficient. And we did everything. It wasn't just automating data entry, but we built scripts to automate crawling Google to do keyword checking to see where we are on the search engine rankings. We did. I remember we used to do scraping of data so that the people could get call lists, so that they knew which restaurants were in Manchester. There were tons and tons of stuff we did to make the whole team and the whole operation more efficient. And that eventually got me into the world where they wanted to move me over to the tech team. And the tech team for this business was based over in Turkey. And so they very, very kindly sent me over for a few weeks to Turkey to meet this tech team and just learn everything about our current stack. We were on Amazon Web Services. I'd never heard of it at the time. We had this whole content management system that I think was built on Mambo or something. My memory's a bit hazy. But again, Ali and the team over there were just unbelievable, doing things on such a bit of a shoestring, and so technically gifted. And in those 2 weeks, I think I just learned more than I think I've ever learned in the tech world. There was just every day was just a fire hydrant of tech info, which was awesome, because when we came back, we had lots of new ideas. We were thinking about, well, how do we revamp the site? How do we? There were things in the current CMS that were just really limiting to what we wanted to do and what our customers were asking for, that we just physically couldn't deliver to them. That was seeing us fall back a little bit and seeing churn creep up. We then, now that we had that knowledge in house and on our own shore, we could start moving a bit quicker and kind of prototyping what the next version looked like. So I very much moved into this development role, and under the guidance of the MD there, Gary, my old boss, who was genuinely the best boss I've ever had. Obviously I've had lots of little jobs, but this is my first proper job. But he was such a hugely trusting person. And I don't know if that was his background. He came from investment banking out in kind of Bermuda, for HSBC. But he was just so trusting, and he wasn't ever interested in blame. I never really saw him get angry or annoyed in any way. Like he'd obviously he got more gutted. He got like disappointed dad, which was horrendous. That just hurt a lot. But he would never point a finger, and that both of them things stuck with me. That kind of being really, really trusting, giving your team the longest leash you can, but having clear guidelines. Like he had a clear North Star. We want to do this thing. How you get there is up to you, but we want to do this thing. And we check in regularly to see if we're in the right direction. And if often we weren't on the right direction, because things happen in startups, as you both know. And it was never a big deal. It was never like, this is the end of the world. I need you to pull the plug. I need somebody to take the fall. It was just cool. What are we going to do about this? How are we going to take ownership of this? And what are we going to do differently? And that has shaped how I came to lead my team. And I say lead more than manage, because I suck at management. I've deferred all of that to an amazing colleague of mine, Lucy. But lead my team has all been shaped by Gary.
And it's really interesting you've like pulled out that distinction between leading and managing, because a lot of people conflate the two. I want to get back to that later, but I really wanted to close this bit off. Actually, I think Steve will have a lot to say about leading and management as well.
I have a lot to say. I'm not sure if I'm any good at it, but yeah.
I second that, actually. Yeah, what I wanted to talk about was you had Gary, you got all this wonderful experience, you felt safe, you felt nurtured. So what made you want to take the step up and be a small business owner?
Yeah, there was a few things really. The writing was a little bit on the wall with that business. It was a fantastic business, but Google were very clear in the direction they were going. They were saying that what you needed to put on the internet needed to be high quality. It needed to be of benefit to our users. And whilst we thought it was, because we were giving people lists of restaurants in Manchester, for example, and that, if you're searching for restaurants in Manchester, I don't know how you get more high quality than the actual list. But Google disagreed, and so we kept fighting this more and more uphill battle as time went on. So we knew there was a finite time within that business for sure. We knew that the writing was on the wall with Google, and at the same time, my friend from school, Michael, he was at uni at the time. He was doing business in the third year or the last year of his business degree. They had to come up with an idea and a business plan and kind of build it all out, and he'd done that, and he'd looked at it and he'd said, I think this is actual business. He'd come up with the idea of an anti-bullying tool for schools, and he'd done a lot of research around competitors, and there was nothing at the time. There was things that the school do, kind of open door policies. There was, come and use the anonymous suggestion box in reception that everybody can see. And then there were things that amazing charities and agencies do, like Childline, where they let children speak up, but none of them were speaking to children in this day and age. With children are getting more and more online, they're more used to conversations on their smartphone than in person, and none of them were doing it well enough that something could be done about the feedback. So, if Childline were getting them reports, they weren't connected with the school, so it's hard for them to, get to the root cause of the challenge, for example, despite doing a fantastic job in everything else. And so he pestered me for weeks. He'd come back to Berry and said, I think we should build this. We should do like an MVP, a demo, he was not a product person, so he wasn't saying MVP. He was like, we should just build this whole thing. And we were like, well, if you want to build it, it would be like an MVP. But even that's going to take some time and money. And he's like, oh, well, I don't have money. I can't pay you. I'll give you some shares in the business. So I said, well, every tech person I've ever met says when somebody says, I've got a class idea, you build it all and I'll give you shares in the business.
Red flag city right there, buddy.
Yeah. I can't pay my gas bill with hopes and dreams.
Yeah, do you accept shares that may or may not translate into money?
Yeah. I wish they did. I wish they did. But one of Mike's many admirable qualities is he's very persistent, and so it was like a war of attrition with him. He just kept batting at that wall, and then eventually I caved in and I said, right, we'll meet up at in the cafe. We'll build a little MVP. And when I talk MVP, this is like PowerPoint. It's not an app at all. It's enough to do a demo. It's enough to get the gist of the idea across. It was more akin to wireframes. And I left them to it. I said, the next thing before we go any further is we need to validate it. We need to see if schools are interested in this conversation. We need to see if businesses are interested in this conversation. And he came back to me on the Monday and said, mate, you won't believe it. I've got a contract to give this to every school in the town. I said, how the hell did you manage that? He said he'd went to one of the town's bigger employers and he said, do you want to sponsor this for every school? And they said, yeah. And they said, how much? And he said, let's do for 5K. And so I was like, Mike, this is, one, it's amazing, but two, we don't have a product. Like we've got this PowerPoint presentation. I was like, yeah, but now I have $5,000 so I can pay you. And then that set us off on this journey where we were basically both moonlighting. He was working on the side. I was still at my business that I was at first. And we did that for, I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5 months of just like really early product research, getting it into the high school and a couple of the primary schools. And it just quickly became apparent that Toot Toot was just way more than just bullying. We describe it as an anti-bullying tool because it's so much easier for people to understand that, okay, yeah, I get that. It's a really easy concept. But it's all manner of safeguarding. It's domestic abuse, it's self-harm, it's mental health, it's exam stress, it's the changes that children go through in their teenage years in their body and how they feel about that. It's so much more. And that was eye-opening to see them stats come through on our dashboards that we realized we needed to actually think about taking this a bit more seriously and giving it a bit more time than just moonlighting. And that's what we ended up doing. We ended up meeting through a series of very fortunate events. We ended up meeting a business in Manchester called Commando Joe's.
I've got a question. Back up to the cafe. Back up to when Mike, wasn't it? And he's breaking you down, and he's like kind of really pushing against you. I'm interested in that dynamic between co-founders, right? Yeah. You've got a co-founder on my side who put you, let's be honest, right? Let's call it what it is. He put you in a position like where it's like, I've signed a 5K deal and you've now got to deliver this. Do you think that like you would have actually gone on to produce Toot Toot if it wasn't for Mike going ahead and pushing that, or do you think that like that push was what you needed, or do you think I'm completely off the mark with that? Because I don't think had we not got that initial first contract that generated that excitement, I don't think we'd have pushed ahead with Toot Toot. I spoke to a really good friend of mine who was also a founder, and we kind of described running a business as it's like 40% terrible. It's like 59% just okay, like things haven't burned down today. And it's 1% utter elation. And every founder I've ever met chases that one, but they will deal with so much bad in the 99 to chase that 1%. And that for us was our first Steve,
1%
do you relate?
Well, I mean, I can't relate because I'm not a founder, but I can relate as a CEO. Most of my day is spent on firefighting, basically. So,
yeah. And you deal with so much of it because the one day in very few that everything just lines up and goes amazingly well, it just feels so good. And you go home that night on such a high, and it just, I don't know what it does. At least for me, it recharges batteries, it galvanizes me, it just motivates me. And then I'm fine to deal with more of that horribleness for the next 6 to 9 months.
I'd say the best comparison you can have in the summary you've provided in the way that we describe our jobs daily is someone who is trying to play golf. And then they play, but most shots are either going right or left, or they missing the shots, or they're missing their putts. They get to the 18th and they hit this phenomenal drive down the middle. That's the one shot that they've had the whole day that can actually be called a shot. They will be back for more.
Yeah,
just because they one shot.
Yeah, they were ready to pack it in on the 17th, and now they're booking their next tee time.
So what you're saying is you're gluttons for punishment, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I play both golf and I'm in a CEO of a business, so yes, I'm definitely a glutton.
I had another question actually. So you could have started any business in the world, right? But what was interesting to me when I was doing my research on you founded Toot Toot, which you kind of got into a little bit. That is more than an anti-bullying platform. You started Stribe, which is obviously solving a problem that you think businesses have with employee engagement. And like, I kind of felt that like there was a little bit of altruism there. That like you were looking at those issues and you were thinking like, especially on the Toot Toot side, these are fundamental things that need to be resolved. Did that enter, your mindset, when you were doing it? Is that core to you, as an individual or not?
Yeah. And I think some of that was just how I was brought up. Like we were always brought up to be honest and be open about our thoughts, our feelings, be honest about how you act as well. Like you can't go about stiffing people over because, you're growing up in a place that it's not wealthy. In the town we grew up on, people managed to get through because people helped each other out. Like I remember my younger brother getting clothes off of older kids that were like really nice branded clothes because they'd outgrown them, but he was growing up as well, and that sort of stuff. It was just that sense of community was really lovely. You know, me and my brother going down to Jesse and Tom's for scones on a Saturday and Sunday, making the poor old women bake for us while we watched Countdown. I mean, it was lovely because they never once kind of murmured about it being a chore or murmured about it being annoying. They just loved the company. I hope. Maybe they were annoyed that somebody was eating all their butter. But it felt like they loved the company. So yeah, I think that when I saw the early data in Toot Toot, that certainly changed my mindset, because I didn't think when we were building it, I didn't think it was a massive problem, because I never experienced bullying at school at all. I was a fairly large kid. I had a really great group of friends, but people in my family did, and I never at the time appreciated that. Like my older brother, for example, is visually impaired. He actually went to a Royal Blind School in Edinburgh. But I remember in his early years when we were at school together, just getting into scraps all the time because people would take the mick out of him or whatever. And I never really put much thought into how does he feel or how do other people feel when that happens to them. Because in my mind, I was like, right, that problem's now solved. You know, we've just had that scrap, or we've just solved it with that other kid. But when we started seeing this early data come through in Toot Toot, it really did open my eyes to just what the prevalence of all of these issues that really worry younger people. And during our journey of that, it's kind of funny you mention the altruism side, because I'll come back to that in a second. But during that journey, I remember we spoke to the kids of the schools that were using us well, because we really wanted to understand, like, how do we scale this? How do we grow this? Yeah. And when we're chatting to them, we're saying, why do you trust us? Why don't you go knock on the door of your teacher and say, sir, miss, this is going on in my life? Why trust Toot Toot? Why go on our app and say, this is happening at home, or this is a really embarrassing thing, or this one's a really big worry of mine? And they said a few things that resonated with us. One was, because when I use Toot Toot, something gets done about it. So we kind of took that to mean there's a feedback loop. You know, you put something in Toot Toot, the school would then receive that report, reply to it, and hopefully resolve it for the child, which was amazing. Wow. But importantly, they said, we don't get wrong. So they have that psychological safety, just like what I had in the business that I started in my career. They had this psychological safety to be able to speak up and have that conversation in the first place and know that there's no repercussions. And that, for us, really set a fire under our belly to think maybe this could work in a business, but in order for it to work, we need to rethink how we position it, because we don't think it would work as an anti-bullying or a whistleblowing tool for businesses. We think it needs to be geared more towards that. If you think about feedback loops and psychological safety, for us, the obvious thing came around was employee engagement, employee voice. How do we give a voice to people? And at that point, it was then thinking about who, which obviously we'll talk about later in terms of the types of businesses we work with. But that, over the last couple of years, has saw way more growth in our business than on the school side. And what that's actually allowed us to do is, schools harp at every single day. I'm a trustee of a multi-academy trust here in Manchester, and the financial constraints on schools are just horrendous. And it gets worse every single year. And they do so much with so little. It is honestly commendable to see. And our product is not, it's not a compulsory purchase. Schools who don't have the resources can MacGyver ways round to giving pupils a voice that aren't in anywhere near as good as ours, I don't think, but they can still do it, and they can still do that on a shoestring. Because for our product, there is still money that needs to change hands, and that is hard for a bursar to find and for a head teacher to find when your school is already stretched. And so we thought about that for some time, and over the last kind of 2 years, just through the success of Stribe, we've done a couple of things. One is we've pulled that lever of price on education, so we've made it's about 80% cheaper per school than it was a couple of years ago, per year. And then the second thing was we had this brainwave maybe 8 to 12 months ago to let businesses do what we did in the early days, sponsor this for schools. So when you give a voice to your staff, we want to give a voice to the communities that those staff live and work in by providing Toot Toot for free, fully funded by your business because you signed up to Stribe. And that social value element has been, it's been a very good differentiator for us in the market, but it's also been extremely well received by the businesses because they're going to their staff and saying, look, this is not just an employee survey. It's not just an employee suggestion box. We're also doing this.
It's becoming a pillar of the community, right? Intrinsic to the value. Yeah, that's smart. Yeah. I like that a lot.
So let's just, that's amazing. So let's just talk a little bit about numbers, if you don't mind. So you said that allowed you to grow as a business. So maybe do you want to give us a little bit of a flavor around, how many customers you currently have, what that means for your revenue, your team size?
Yeah, across all of our products, we're probably getting to around 400 or so customers-ish. Wow. The last time I looked, we team size, we're 5.5. We have 5 people full-time in the business. We have 1 person part-time in the business. And then we also work with just a couple of contractors that we kind of dial up and dial down as we need it. Everybody in the business day to day is focused now on sales and marketing. How do we grow this side of the business? And it's the contractors that are there to supplement the product and keep that important product direction going, because obviously customers every day are after more and more things because they come up with new and unique challenges in their own business that they want to work with us to help solve, and we want to help them solve. So 400 or so customers. The good chunk of them are on the school side of things. There's probably more schools when you think about the free licenses we give away as well, but I can't remember the numbers of that. Overall, probably about 500,000 users, I think, was the last time we checked. Wow. It was across all the products. A really good size. And this year, in the next kind of 6 to 9 months, we're hoping to become cash flow positive. Like we're in a very nice space, and that's all been built on this foundation of Stribe and businesses giving us that longer term commitment that only they could give, that we couldn't see and couldn't get from schools because schools didn't know what their budgets looked like next year. And so that foundation has really allowed us to take more risks in investing in our team and bring in more resource in on that sales and marketing, and to help us get to that point a lot quicker.
Brilliant. And obviously you say you'll get cash flow positive in the next 6 to 9 months. What have you currently done to finance the business so far?
So all of it has been equity investment. So since the very beginning, our very first equity investment I touched on earlier, we were extremely fortunate, maybe 3 to 6 months into Toot Toot, to meet an awesome business and a leadership team called Commando Joes, and we met them for a cup of coffee, and we showed them what we did in the ed tech space. They told us about their world, which was about employing military veterans and putting them into schools around curriculum-based kind of role models within schools. And it was just a really nice fit, both businesses. And they said to us over this coffee and over this bacon roll that they love what we're doing. They can see that the education market moving into tech. They themselves admitted that they're not techie, but they want to help guide us into that world. And so literally, I think we came away from that meeting with our first seed investment, which was just such an elating feeling to think about. We'd been just moonlighting on this, not taking any money out of it. We'd run the whole business on that first 5K that we'd had. It was used to spend on servers and a couple of odd subscriptions here and there, like not very much at all. So we still had like 4,800 in the bank or something. So quite a long runway. And then the only thing we were told when we were offered this investment was, I remember they said, we don't want you to spend it all on pizza and beer, so we want you to come to Manchester so that we can help support you, basically. And they did, and I think that support was probably way more valuable at the time than the money, because we got office space, we got other people in the industry who we were working side by side with, They were working on CJs, they weren't working on ours, but it was nice to just bounce ideas off them and have that camaraderie. And they did things like they rented cars and vans for us, and like that was through their business, and they wouldn't even cross charge them to our business. They would give us office space and wouldn't cross charge into our business. So there was tons of this kind of non-monetary support, not least of which the advice and the guidance as well that was awesome.
Talk to me a little bit about that value, actually, because there's probably going to be listeners to the podcast that are considering like getting investment or are considering starting up their own business. You talked about the non-monetary stuff. Just go into a little bit more detail on that for me, please.
Yeah, I mean, we've nearly always had advice in the business. Like at the very beginning, we didn't. Like when it was just an idea in Mike's head, and me and him building it, and then trying it out in a few schools, we were very rudderless. We just wanted to try it out in the schools and see what came of it, and kind of let the stream take us wherever the stream took us. But when after we met CJ's and the team there, Mike, Bill, and Terry, we realized the value of a lot of this advice, and realizing that you can't know everything. I think I touched on earlier one of the things that I love to do is try lots of things. Like I think my knowledge of things is like an ocean wide, but it's like a puddle deep on lots of topics. But the thing that I'm kind of unapologetic about is if I don't know something, I'm now fortunate that I know there's people in my network, or even if there's not people in my network, I will unembarrassedly reach out to somebody on LinkedIn and say, I'd love to pick your brains about this thing. You've done this, and I want to know how you've done this. And you've got to show a lot of vulnerability to do that. It's very hard. You've got to drop your ego, and that was hard in the earlier years. And that created a lot of kind of clashes whenever things came up. Because you thought you were on the right path, and you had to really just reflect that actually it's just your ego talking. It's not anything else.
But it's this bias, isn't there? There's this bias to think that you should have all the answers, right? Yeah. As a business owner, but that's just patently not true.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you're reaching out to somebody cold. Like I remember reaching out to a chap who'd run a HR business, and this was in the early days of Stribe. And they'd grown this business to be not founder led anymore. Like all of their sales looked to the outside looking in. I didn't know if this was the case or not, but to the outside looking in, it looked like it was driven by some sort of partnership model. But I know in the early days it must have been founder led, because every successful business I know had founders on the ground selling their product. And I wanted to know how that transition came about. And I remember reaching out to this chap, and I just had to show vulnerability in the message. Like I remember sharing with him financials and stuff in my first cold message. Like, this is where we are as a business. I'm at this. I'm doing this. This is my big challenge. You look like you've been on that journey before. I'd love to take 20 minutes of your time and just pick your brains. And we ended up having a conversation for about 2 hours. It was amazing.
I actually feel like what is interesting is that other founders and other CEOs, they're actually really keen on giving you that time, because they learn from you as well, right? So I always find that if I reach out, I pretty much get a good positive response back, because it's good to chat to everyone else.
Guys, I have actually a question for both of you, actually, both being CEOs, that just popped into my head. So I've always been fascinated with, I think my perception is like your job's actually quite lonely at the top, given that the pressure you talked about there, Kieran, and then seeking out advice. And I just wanted to know, both of you, how you deal with that. And if that's true, actually, if I've got that completely wrong or not.
It definitely is lonely. We've gone through times in our journey where it's felt way more lonely than other times. The way I deal with it is try and surround myself with people who are going through similar things. So I'm amazing friends with a community of maybe 15 startups in Manchester, 15 people I would consider friends. We would go out, we'd have a drink, we can meet up anytime and just empathize and chat and rant about whatever it is we're going through, but at the same time help each other out, whether that can you comment on my LinkedIn post to give me more reach, or whether that's, can you do me an intro to this person because you know that person, and I think it would be really helpful. And like Steve said there, every founder, every CEO, I think because they realize how tough it is in that position, they're so willing to give it. And it's one of the reasons I also want, when people reach out to me, it doesn't matter if I've had like junior devs reach out to me asking kind of, what do I do to start my career, all the way to other founders reaching out saying, how did you tackle this problem? How do you tackle this market? And I've never once shied away from wanting to give that time back and kind of pay that forward either.
I'm very lucky that I have an amazing team. So, I rally around them. They give me energy. Where it becomes lonely is that you are the person that makes the final call. And also the buck stops with you. So if something's going wrong, you have to figure it out with your team, obviously. You try and keep your team involved so that they can be aligned with whatever you decide. But ultimately, that's, your call at the end. And if investors are looking for, answers to things, you have to find that out. So that's where it becomes lonely. I'm lucky to have a very, very solid exec team who, are very, very keen to try and support the business in the way that we move forward. I'm very lucky to have a chairman who is an amazing sounding board and very supportive of the things that I do. And like you said, I do have a community around me that can just give me some kind of direction for things that we just know are not tackling. So I belong to 2 or 3 big organizations that are based on CEOs. So SaaS Rise, I'm calling out, Pavilion, which is another sales-led but now a CEO-led community, and you can really try and get help from them and seek advice from them, and they're quite active in that. So yeah, those are the kinds of ways I try and deal with the loneliness and pressure.
No, 100%.
All right, thank you for that. The other question I had was, so Stribe was born out of Toot Toot fundamentally, but I wanted to understand a little bit more about how Stribe came about, but then also as well, challenges and pain points and how you troubleshooted and got through them, and just really like a feel for where Stribe is at its journey at the moment, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. So how it came about was, it was off the back of them conversations with the students that made us realize maybe there's something here in a workplace. We don't yet know what it was. We weren't thinking employee engagement at the time. We were thinking whistleblowing, because we thought, well, that has worked in education. Maybe it will work within businesses. And this was, not too long off things like the LIBOR scandal and stuff in the news, where the interest rate scandal. And we thought maybe professional services would be after something, or maybe local authorities would be after something that would allow or give protection to whistleblowers. And we tried that early on. We didn't have any real great success with it. It was very hard to open them doors. And that was through a combination of things. There was people who just truly didn't think they had a problem and just thought it was just going to be something that sits on the shelf gathering dust. And there were people who didn't want to kind of introduce something into their business because they thought culturally it might change the dynamics. If your workforce don't think you have a whistleblowing problem, and then all of a sudden you're bringing out a whistleblowing tool, like, does that make people look over their shoulder a little bit? Like, why are we doing this? This is a bit strange. And so we knew we had to diverge from the brand that we built on Toot Toot, and it's a great brand. So we had our work cut out for us, and in order to do that, we had to look at what else was out there, because we were thinking about employee engagement. But if you Google employee engagement, there's tons of stuff. There's tons and tons of amazing products by amazing businesses, and there's tons of roll your own solutions as well. Like, if you're doing surveys, you don't have to buy any of them. You could use a Microsoft form, and that's good enough. Or you could do it on paper if you're all in the same office. But we looked at what all of them businesses were doing well, and the big one was data. And we did the same in schools. One of the unique things we had was, despite Toot Toot being anonymous, we were hooked up to school MIS systems. So we knew things like the year group that children were in. We knew if they were, pupil premium. We knew if they were gifted and talented. And so we could give that sort of intelligence to schools on a macro level. And we know that schools loved that because it helped them make better decisions on what they invested in next. And so we knew that whatever we did in workplaces, we had to do the same. We had to hook into that same rich data set that we have in schools with, maybe the HR provider that they've got in businesses. But then we looked at things that they weren't doing well. And the two things that we honed in on, one was very related to Toot Toot in the sense of there was none really focusing on doing something about the feedback. They were all focused on getting feedback. And we knew from the work we'd done in Toot Toot that if you focus on doing something about it, that feedback loop, that's going to be the thing that moves the needle within the organization for sure. We just saw that in the data of Toot Toot. The other thing we saw them not focus on very much was disconnected businesses. They all of these other platforms out there were very focused on businesses like ours, businesses like Capsule, where your business is hyper connected. You all have a desk, you all have an email, a laptop, you're probably all on Slack or Teams. And so that's a bit, that's not to say we don't have engagement challenges in our businesses, but it's a slightly easier challenge to tackle when we can reach every member of staff through some sort of tech. What we looked at was in schools, we were reaching a very dispersed group of people and kids. They weren't on school emails at the time. They weren't allowed their phones in school. There was no Wi-Fi about, and yet we still reached these children wherever they were and gave them a voice. And we wanted to take that same experience we'd grown in that market and take it to workplaces that also had deskless or dispersed workforces. So we started working with manufacturers, utilities, construction, people that had really, really remote and dispersed workforces, and giving them a voice and reaching them wherever they were. So that was the early days of Stribe, and that was probably one of, if not the biggest challenge we had was honing in on where does that product fit, because we were investing development time in it because we believed in it strongly that it was definitely the right direction to go. When we talked to businesses, and albeit we talked to quite a few hyper-connected businesses, they all talked about challenges they had with retaining and attracting amazing staff. So we knew that this was a huge market, a huge a problem to solve. But which businesses and whatnot to focus on, that was a real challenge. It took us a bit of time to hone in on dispersed workforces and find our niche.
How do you create a workplace environment where employees feel valued and motivated?
Help them feel heard. Talk to them. Talk to them. Recognize the amazing achievements that they do every single day. And show them that you're not just listening to them because you want to tick a box. You're listening to them because you want to make change that helps them bring their whole self into work.
Steve, this is for you, this next question. And this is the way I'm going to run this section, actually. We've not done this before on the podcast, but I'm going to ask both of you questions. How do you act on employee feedback, Steve?
Yeah, great question. So firstly, to get employee feedback and to actually, empower them and encourage them to give feedback, you need to create a culture that allows for that direct feedback and supports it. You can get employee feedback that is quite guarded, and so the first thing for me is to try and encourage a culture where you are enabled to give very good feedback. Any feedback's good, doesn't matter what it is, and no matter how hard it is. Of course, we try and encourage feedback to be able to be relevant to the actual issue rather than personal. And we try and create a scenario where it needs to be a solution-based type of feedback rather than just complaining, right? So ultimately, we try and do that in the most convenient and constructive way. And then what we do is we take it back to their managers, to the exec team, and just make sure that those feedback points are discussed and to see if we can do anything about it. Yep.
I wanted to ask you, Kieran, now, for really small businesses, like the 0 to 5, 5 to 10, I kind of feel from my experience in those sorts of businesses, personal development isn't something that's like super, or professional development, should I say, isn't something that's super, I feel in some of them that important, because it's just like you execute. But given, your expertise in employee engagement, the experiences that you've talked about, what's the best way for small employers to approach that like kind of paradigm? How do they build those loops in, to encourage, nurture, and develop their staff?
Yeah, it is tough. I touched on it earlier. Like, I'm not a great manager, and I recognize that immediately when I was thrust into a management position. And I think it's the same for any entrepreneur I've ever met. You're wired as an entrepreneur to go and try and solve a problem yourself and try and work out your path to that unknown path that's going to get you to a solution that you have no idea what that solution is going to be. And so it can be hard, and this is why I think I suck as a manager, is it's hard for you in them shoes to empathize when an employee is saying, I need professional development, I need you to help guide me, because in your head you guide yourself, and so it's hard to put yourself in their shoes to say, like, well, I don't know what to give you. Like, I go on Google, or I hound that guy that runs the HR software, because he knows the answer. And so the first thing I would say for smaller businesses is if you first of all recognize whether or not you're a bad manager, and if you are, try and delegate that. That it's a skill to manage people effectively. My colleague Lucy is amazing at it. She has very regular one-to-ones with the team. She's awesome at setting up objectives and helping people work through challenges and stuff. And when we realized that, we just shifted everything on that side over to her. And I guess the second one is try and carve out some time for it. So we give a lot of, and that can be hard for depending on the type of business you have, but we give our employees a lot of flexibility. We work core hours, 10 till 2, and you do your 8-hour day around them core hours. But once or twice a week, you can choose to take an hour out of the day, to whether that's to start a bit later or to finish a bit earlier, because you want to work on something yourself. And it doesn't have to be professional development related. It can be well-being related. You just want to go to the gym, or you just want to go on a walk, or you just want to finish early, go and see your friends and recharge your batteries, like that sort of thing. That's all cool. So trying to carve out time, but it's so hard because, like you say, you're focused on execute. But I guess if you look at it in terms of 5 people in a business, that's 200 working hours a week. Losing one of them, it's not going to kill anything. It's 0.5% of the week. You're not going to not hit a sales target because you didn't work for 0.5% of the week.
I wanted to ask the same question as Steve. Is there anything you would add to that? Anything you feel? Because obviously Kieran's admitted that he's not management isn't his strength. I was about to say something worse than that, but
I like the political way you
politeness.
Put it.
Yeah. But anything that you would add to that?
There's a few things, but I think I want to give this context because we are further in our stage, in our company stage, right? So we have 50 employees. We have a bigger budget to work on, right? So when you can layer into a budget plan, you can then determine how to create more opportunities to focus on career development, right? So, or personal development, right? So we do have professional coaching for particular people in our management team to be able to be better managers. We have away days for those managers as well, just to make sure that they are learning as they go. We look at professional development in terms of your own career growth. So we encourage every single employee in our team to be able to go to conferences and learn, to go to events and learn, to do online things and learn, and we support them from a budget perspective, obviously to a certain amount. So from that perspective, we're trying to always encourage our staff to be able to openly grow. But you be proactive about it. We're not going to try and do it. We're going to try and ask you to be proactive about it. And then we have a very structured way of doing things. Rach in our HR team is very good at giving us a lot of structure around how we do our annual reviews, and not just our annual reviews, anything that's personal development wide. So yeah, but I do feel like we're in an advanced stage, right? If I were to be in your business stage right now at 5, or 5.5, I would say that I would struggle like you. I do rely on other people to be able to create the structure around me. I do rely on other people to create the process. I'm very keen to get involved and support the process and lead by example, but I kind of need people just to give me that structure to be able to keep to it and be accountable to it. So yeah, hopefully that's answered the question there, John.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's just interesting having that like contrast between the two, for sure, because, Stride's at a very different, stage compared to Capsule. So I thought that was really interesting. Kieran, right? Let's just say someone has used Stribe. They've identified a morale turnover issue as a consequence of a survey feedback. How would you suggest that small businesses go around solving that problem?
Yeah, it always comes back to comms. Speak to your employees. Like, you're not going to have the answers on tons of challenges, whether they're morale issues, whether they're ED&I issues. You're not an expert on everything, but your employees will tell you why they're leaving. Your employees will tell you why they're not feeling 100%, why they're not feeling like they can bring their whole self into work. So I would say, as long as you can give them that psychological safety to voice that, like Steve said earlier, you've got to give them a place where they can feel like they trust you to act upon that feedback, because it can actually backfire. If you ask that feedback and you get a lot of it and then you do nothing about it, you've just made the problem worse, because now there's a disingenuousness of what you've just catalyzed in that process.
And what mechanisms like, would you suggest to leverage for that feedback? Would be like one-to-ones, confidential like opportunities, or the kind of questions that you ask in one-to-ones, right?
Yeah, it would be a mix of formal and informal for me. So you've definitely got the one-to-ones and whatnot, but you've also in my team, in a smaller team, you can tell when you're working with every single employee, as I am every single day. I know when someone's not 100%, and as long as I've demonstrated over the years, which I feel like I have, that I'm not going to boot off when somebody says something that's negative. I'm not interested in coming back to my old boss. I'm not interested in blaming. I'm interested in just solving what the challenge is. That relationship affords me the ability to then call that out and to ask that question and say, hey, you don't look 100%. Are you feeling okay? Like, do you want to have a chat about this? Like, outside of the work thing that we're just dealing with now, how are you? And I think the smaller you are as a business, the easier that is for sure, because you're so in tune with every single employee. And then the larger you become, that just becomes much tougher, because you are far and away removed from everybody in the business, and that in itself can breed a little bit of mistrust. Because as much as Steve's a lovely guy, if somebody's just joined Capsule, there's no way they're going to go to Steve and say, yeah, they're not going to go to Steve and say, I think we could do the onboarding better. I've just gone through it. I think it's terrible. They're going to be terrified. They're going to think, Steve's the CEO. There's no way I'm going to mention that whatsoever. I'm going to keep stum, and I'll just let the next person deal with the crap onboarding as well.
Some people really hate one-to-ones.
Yeah.
The reason why they hate one-to-ones is because they think it's boring, and they think it's just paper pushing, right? Pen pushing, sorry, is that the right term? And I believe that a one-to-one for me isn't confirmed written actions all the time. I think a one-to-one for me is a check-in. So, I have check-ins with everyone. John and I have check-ins every 3 weeks. He doesn't report directly to me. He reports into our CMO, but we have check-ins anyway. And the whole purpose of that is for me to be able to listen. Just hear where that person's at. We have this thing called the donuts, so we try and make sure that people are connecting in that way as well. And it's just listening. And then with the one-to-ones, we do have structures in place for that very reason. I don't want my managers to be just writing down notes. I want them to be listening and seeing how they can help those people, if they can help those people. And then the final thing for me is, I'm not afraid for people to leave this business. I'm not afraid. If their circumstances have changed and they feel like they're wanting another challenge and they feel like they've come to the end of their opportunities here, that's okay.
Yeah.
But as long as we have tried to solve the gaps or the issues that they're really annoyed by, rather than them just wanting to move on because of their professional career, for me that's a win. They've come to a point where they're wanting to try something different, and we need to be able to support them in that process.
Massively.
I think leaving is sometimes like a bit of a dirty word, and my wife Heather has had a lot of jobs in her time, and people look at her CV and they see that she's worked at many companies: Manchester United, Chelsea, the BBC, Optimizely, and she does a year and a half, 2 years there, but she's very ambitious. My wife, she gets the experience from the role, gives a lot, of herself in that role, and then it's on to, the next, kind of opportunity to learn, grow, and, develop. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Then, thanks very much, Kieran, Steve, for your time. Very much appreciated. If you guys like the episodes, please let us know in the comments. If you folks would like to see something different on the next episode of the podcast, or if you'd like to see a specific topic, do let us know in the comments description. Let us know via a feedback form. But from me, thanks so much for listening. It's great to have you here, Kieran. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for having me on.
Cheers, Kieran.